Howdy Ags, Professor D here again. This video is going to focus on payment and cash flow on a construction project. However, before we zoom into the specifics of payment and cash flow on a project, I want to orient us on a macro level to remember that we are now shifting our focus to contracts and how contracts are used to manage and allocate risk on a construction project. Every construction project involves many different types of risks. Project schedule risks, health and safety risks, project change risks, unknown site conditions, acts of God. All of these risks have to be managed, and you are taking courses that help you learn how to manage all of these specific risks carefully. In an ideal world, if all of these individual risks are carefully managed, then the construction contract becomes merely documentation and it never has to be referenced again after it is signed. Unfortunately, we do not live in an ideal world, and unforeseen events, COVID-19, do arise. Therefore, construction contracts are necessary to allocate the financial implications of all of these different specific risks between the parties. One very important function of the construction contract that is relevant even if everything goes to plan is management of payment and cash flow on a job. When we discuss the financial success of a construction project, there are two equally important elements. One, of course, is price. Whatever method you use for price, whether it's lump sum, cost plus, the price that you are paid for the contract that you enter into, whether it's a general contractor, subcontractor, or material supplier, must be sufficient to cover your hard costs and allow for profit at the end of the job if you want to be successful. The other equally important aspect of financial success is payment and cash flow. Companies that are technically profitable can be forced into bankruptcy and failure when cash flow is not properly managed. And this starts with understanding and negotiating appropriate payment terms in your contract. When it comes to exchange of consideration in a contract, ideally each party would exchange their bargained for consideration at the same time. I'll give you $5 for this DVD. This exchange can happen simultaneously. More complex exchanges, like construction projects, cannot simultaneously swap payment and performance at the same time. In instances like construction, when exchange cannot be simultaneous, the common law of contracts requires performance to be complete before payment is required. That is, if the party's contract does not otherwise specify payment terms, no payment is required until performance is 100% complete. This protects the paying party from parting with their cash and having the performing party run off without performance. However, it also creates a risk for the performing party that they will fully perform the work and not be paid or not be paid fully. Additionally, depending on the subject matter of the contract, it can require the performing party to incur significant debt. The performance first and payment second system works fairly well for some contracts. For instance, I promise to pay you $50 for a birthday cake if you promise to bake me a tasty custom cake. The cost and time involved in performance of baking a cake are relatively small and easy for the baker, the performing party, to absorb prior to payment. In more complex and costly contracts, like construction projects, this system presents obvious problems. In the construction scenario, the paying party is the owner and the performing party is the contractor, and of course all of the subcontractors and material suppliers. In all but the smallest and simplest construction jobs, making the contractor fully perform the contract prior to payment
would be a practical impossibility. Or, at the very least, require the contractor to finance the project for the owner. That is, the contractor would have to take out a loan and pay interest on that loan until the job is complete. This, in turn, would either eat into the contractor's profits or increase the total cost of construction. Either way, it is putting the risk of financing losses on the contractor rather than the project owner, where the cost properly belongs. Thus, the construction industry uses its written contracts to specify a progress payment system that seeks to balance the risks of non-simultaneous exchange of consideration. Although the details of the progress payment system can and do vary by contract, the standard progress payment system used in the construction industry in America provides payment to the contractor on a monthly basis based on the percentage of materials on site and work completed on the project to date. Typically, contractors will complete applications for payment, also known as pay-apps, on a monthly basis, showing the amount of work completed in that month and for which the contractor is entitled to payment. The pay-app is then submitted to the owner and/or its rep, as specified by the contract, for approval and payment. Payment is typically required to occur within 30 days of submission of the pay-app. An analogous system is used between subcontractors and the prime contractor, and sub-subcontractors and their sub-subcontractors, etc. The lower tier sub will submit monthly pay-apps or invoices to the higher tier sub, who then submits their pay application or invoice to the next higher tier, including the lower tier sub, all the way up to the prime contractor. As the pay apps trickle up, so the money trickles down from any given pay app submitted by the prime contractor to the owner. The owner is the ultimate source of all funds and payments on a construction project. The progress payment system helps to balance the risks of non-simultaneous exchange of consideration, but it is not perfect and leaves several areas of potential concern. First, if a prime contractor or any higher tier contractor is not careful with provisions in its contracts, both with higher and lower tier contractors, it can leave the contractor financing the job by having a contractual requirement to pay lower tier contractors before payment is contractually guaranteed to that contractor. It is important that contractors understand the specific details of the payment terms in their contracts so they know when payments are due to them and when payments are due from them. If a contractor owes more money than it is due on a regular basis, this can create the kind of cash flow problem that leads to bankruptcy and business failure, even if the contractor would eventually be profitable at the end of the job. Second, some contracts, like an unaltered AIA A201, which is representative of the industry at large, require pay-apps to be submitted to and approved by the AE before payment is required by the owner. This is not inherently wrong, and it is certainly reasonable for the owner to want to confirm that the amount requested on an application for payment is valid. However, contractors typically do not have contractual relationships with the AE and are barred by the economic loss doctrine from suing the AE. And this puts the contractor in a precarious position if the relationship with the AE gets contentious, or even if the AE simply delays, even inadvertently, in approving applications, which can in turn impact the timeliness of payment from the owner to the prime contractor, and this delay can create cash flow problems for the prime contractor and/or delays in payment all the way down to the lowest tier material, or delays to payment all the way down to the lowest tier material supplier. In an industry with profit margins as thin as the construction industry, This can cause serious financial hardship for the impacted contractors. And yet, those impacted contractors have absolutely no recourse directly against the AE who is responsible for approving pay apps. Another consideration or concern for the owner is the trickle-down payment system. Owners would like some assurance that once they make payment to prime contractors, the money is actually going to the relevant subcontractors and material suppliers, particularly since those subcontractors and suppliers have a statutory right to file a lien or, quote, stake a claim, unquote, on the owner's property. Owners would also like to create an incentive to ensure contractors will finish their work in accordance with the contract documents. To address these concerns, construction contracts often require in their payment terms retainage and lien releases. We will discuss lien releases in another session specifically on liens. Retainage is a percentage, usually somewhere between 5 and 10%, that is withheld by the owner or higher tier contractor from every pay application. The retained amount is held by the owner or higher tier contractor to incentivize the prime contractor or lower tier contractor to continue to perform and complete this project. It also provides funds from which an owner or higher tier contractor can repair defective work by a lower tier contractor discovered prior to its release and or pay lower tier contractors who are not properly paid by the higher tier contractor. Exactly how long retainage will be collected on a project and when retainage will be released should be specified in the party's contract. Retainage is usually collected through at least 50% project completion, sometimes longer, and it is usually released at substantial completion. Unless specifically defined otherwise in the contract, substantial completion is the point in the project when an owner can use their project for its intended purpose. Of course, not all contractors agree that retainage is appropriate, but this is just another attempt to balance the risk of non-simultaneous exchange of consideration in the construction contracting process. This give and take between the parties, balancing of risk or negotiation of terms, is an important part of the ultimate financial success of any construction project. I hope you now have a better understanding of the typical payment process on a construction project and the importance of not just contract price, but also payment terms and cash flow to profitability. And that payment and cash flow are just one of the many parts of contractual risk management.